There was a man traveling when he heard about a Native American Indian who had a perfect memory. He decided that he would test this memory, and he found this Indian and he said to him, "What did you have for breakfast July 4th, 1970? And without hesitation, the Indian replied, "Eggs." The man was unimpressed. Everybody has eggs for breakfast. 20 years later, the man was traveling through the same town. He decided to seek out this same Indian. He approached him with the traditional Native American greeting and said to him, "How?" And the American Indian, without hesitation, said, "Fried." It should not be 20 years between readings of our Bible. But because of often reading our Bible, we should be quite familiar with basically any text. I don't mean to imply that we should all be scholars in every text. When a text is mentioned, we should basically know, like an old familiar friend, what we're talking about. Today, we're going to study from Matthew chapter 27, verses 62 through 66. We haven't been here in a while. I don't know if you guys have mentioned this recently in class. I can't remember anybody preaching about it. This is on the Sabbath day, the Saturday that is after Jesus was buried and before he'll be resurrected. The text itself deals with the rulers, the leaders, and their approach to Pilate to secure the tomb. Before we get into it, it is my responsibility to teach from God's Word today. Gary said that we'll sing the invitation song after the Lord's Supper. I know that was a little slip, but I pray that you are fed meat during these next few minutes. We are going to join in welcoming our visitors. So in Matthew 27, verse 62, now on the next day, that is the day after the Lord is crucified and buried, the day after preparation, the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered together with Pilate. Well, we're going to make some observations about these people. There will be some 11 of them if time permits, and it might not. The first is their united front. Now this is actually kind of unusual. Okay, so the chief priests are the people who are in charge of, if you will, the ceremonial worship. They are also, being mostly Sadducees, of the ruling class. They are the aristocrats. On the other hand, the Pharisees are the expounders of the law. The priests have given up that for hundreds of years now, and the Pharisees have taken over that role. And so consequently, as much as the Sadducees and the chief priests are in the political ruling position, actually the Pharisees have more influence because they're in people's houses studying the Bible, as it were. Now, these are strange bedfellows. If you think that the Democrats and the Republicans operating together these days are strange, they have nothing compared to this right here. Both the Pharisees and the Sadducees have been vying for power in Israel for about 200 years against each other. That's a history in and of itself. The Pharisees considered Sadducees unclean. The Pharisee, as an Israelite, would avoid a Gentile to the best of his ability. A Pharisee would avoid a Sadducee to the best of his ability. They were the unclean ones. In fact, they talk about not even touching the unclean garment of the unclean one who is a Sadducee. We're reminded of the language in, I think it's Jude, where the sin as though you're fear the unclean garment. That's the same idea. On the other hand, the Sadducees welcomed Hellenism. That's another study. Hellenism is when the Greeks and their culture imposed itself everywhere, including on Judaism, but God had said, no, none of that. Well, the Pharisees basically came about by preventing the Sadducees just welcomed it. So they're natural enemies. The Sadducees would play tricks on the Pharisees, and they're not friendly tricks either. Okay, so the Pharisees would set up their man-made traditions, And because they could do no work on the Sabbath, one of the things is they couldn't carry anything on the Sabbath, okay? And so what they would do to get around that law is in the cities, in these streets, they would rope off entire streets. And if you lived on that street, if you put one of your possessions somewhere in the street, then that street, by extension, became part of your house. And you could go out, and if before the Sabbath you had put something in the street, then that street was also your house, and anything you do in the house you can now do in the street. In fact, you could do in other people's houses too, because there's this whole thing. Well, the Sadducees would come along and they would stick their stuff in the streets that were roped off, so that the Pharisee, who considered the Sadducee unclean, couldn't use that spot. Cats and dogs fighting back and forth against each other. Now, it's together, unified against the Lord here, reminds us of some other times. One time that they were unified against the incoming opposition, so they thought, was Antiochus Epiphanes IV. Now, he was a bad guy. And they unified together against him. So you've got some Jews, some Sadducees, and some Pharisees sitting around talking about, hey, what's the last time we got together? I don't know exactly the last time. One of the few times we've gotten together and actually fought against somebody, who can you think of? Well, I can think of the worst pagan emperor, ruler that ever came around here, Antiochus Epiphanes. And they said, yeah, that's right. And now they're joined together against Jesus Christ. In other words, he is as bad as, to them, Antiochus Epiphanes, or worse. To them, Jesus was as bad or worse than the worst pagan king that they could think of. They don't know what they all stand for, but they know what they all stand against. In fact, the writings of the Pharisees are basically a collection of them trying to figure out what they stood for. And the Sadducees not really agreeing with any of it. They don't know what they stand for, but they sure do know what they stand against, don't they? Consider modern denomination almost always has a creed, right? Now, if you were to take the entire corpus of creeds and put it down in front of you and study them all of them quote-unquote Christians, what you would come up with if you took them all together is, yeah, these people don't know what they're talking about. These people say this, these people say this. These people say A, these people say not A. These people say B, these people say C. Some of them don't understand say the same thing. They don't know what they're talking for, but they know what they're talking against. I'll illustrate it this way. Some of you have seen this quote before. So, evangelical Norman Geisler in his Systematic Theology writes, with regard to soteriology, how to be saved, many people and denominations consider the Church of Christ denomination, I don't like his language, but understand what he's saying, to be a part of the broader evangelical movement, while the others believe it is borderline or even over the line. In most essential doctrines, the Church of Christ is clearly evangelical. The rub, I've heard this twice now today, the rub comes with their insistence that there are 4 necessary conditions for being saved. Churches of Christ believe the 4 necessary acts of obedience to God for salvation are faith, repentance, confession, and baptism. Now, you know, when you drive down the road, if you say, hey, baptism is necessary for repentance, all these congregations out there who can't figure out what they're for, all of them will join up together and say, baptism is not necessary for forgiveness. They'll all join up for that. They don't know what they're for, but they sure do know what they're against. In this case, in both cases, it is against the truth. There's your united front. Then also there's their Lord. In verse 63, they come to Pilate and they say, Sir, we remember that when he was still alive, that deceiver said, after 3 days, I'm going to rise again. This word, sir, now I don't want to overstate the case. But this word serf is the same word that is literally, usually, translated Lord. In the New American Standard Bible, it's translated that way 644 times. It's translated master also, and a few times serf. But this is the word Lord. Now my point here is, and it's actually not from right here, but their Lord is not the Lord. You remember what Pilate, in John's account, Pilate says, "Behold your king." And they say, away with him, crucify him. And he says, "Shall I crucify your king?" And they said, "We have no king but Caesar." Which is kind of interesting, because they hate Caesar. They hate Pilate. If there's one man wrote that if they could agree on anything, the Jews at that time, there was agreement only on this one point, that everyone wished at any cost to be freed from the power of the Romans. And yet here, by the way, what they say is an indication of their guilt. You can figure out what they think and who they are, what kind of person they are, by the way they say. Let me illustrate it this way. Recently, I've seen on Facebook these people, you see it all the time. For example, like a husband will say on Facebook something about his wife. She is this way or she is not this way. It can be good, it can be, whatever. It's not bad. It's on Facebook. They're not putting it out there. Oh, she's horrible. That's not what it is. She'll reply the opposite. No, I'm not. Or yes, I am. Now, from that exchange, after a series of months of that exchange, you will not know what kind of a person she is, whether or not she is as he said. But what will you know about her? She's a badgerer. Whatever he says, she says the opposite. So he might be wrong or right in what he said about her, but what you do know from that interaction, that month-long stream of interaction, she just always matches every time he says something on Facebook. She's right there saying, "No, I'm not," or "Yes, I am." Every time these people say something, it implies something about themselves. Here, we have no king but Caesar. Here, Pilate. When they are saying about Pilate and Caesar, the ones that they hate, basically they're saying anything but Jesus. I said a minute ago, they didn't know what they were for. Yes, they did. Anything but Jesus. That's what they're for. It doesn't matter. Know well, many who claim Jesus as Lord do not submit to him as Lord. Now these people here, they did not claim him as Lord. And they didn't. You could tell easily. Are you for the Lord? No. Some people, although they claim to be for the Lord, you can also tell that they're not for the Lord by their behavior. You remember what Matthew 7 says, "Not everyone who says to me, 'Lord, Lord,' will enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father who is in heaven will enter. Many will say to me on that day, 'Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name cast out demons, and in your name perform many miracles?' And then I will declare to them, 'I never knew you. Depart from me, you who don't do what I tell you to do.'" Luke 6:46, "Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I say?" My point is twofold. Or you can identify the false leader by what they say. You can also identify them regardless of what they say, by what they do. Watch for that, right? Okay, then there is their motive. This is not from this text. Now, I'm going to suggest to you that you put a marker here, because I'll probably turn in and out until the end of the lesson. This comes from John 11. It's made very clear in John 11. Jesus had healed Lazarus by bringing him back to life. Pretty impressive. Verse 45, "Therefore many of the Jews who came to Mary and saw what he had done believed in him." Amen. The Lord of the world is here. He has saved us. People are believing in it. Does it? Especially if you're a religious leader, right? You're like, this is what I'm all about. I'm all about that person coming and doing what that person's going to do, and then I point everybody to him and say, amen. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them the things which Jesus had done. Therefore the chief priests and the Pharisees convened the council and said, what are we doing? Amen. He has come, and we all need to get out there and preach Jesus Christ. That's not what happens if you read the text. For this man is performing many signs, and if we let him go on like this, all men will believe in him. That is their job. And they don't like it. And the Romans, now listen, here's their motive. And the Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation. They like their social position. They like their stuff. They like who they are, where they are, when they are. And so they don't want what God actually has to give them. And so how do they handle it? From that day on, they plan together to kill him. It's a cover-up. Their motive. Now really this points to what their motive is not. Who are these people? They're the religious ones. You look at them, you can tell by the way they're dressed that they're the religious ones. And so obviously, they're the ones where I have a sin problem. Who do I need help from? I need help from him. No, not that person. Because as much as they look the look, they walk the walk sometimes, they talk the talk sometimes, they're not sincere about it at all. This happens in religion, doesn't it? Unless you've been living under a rock, you have heard about the recent recurrence of the Catholic catastrophe. Nobody cares. It's a system set up not to care. From the beginning, it doesn't care. But right now, the priests are doing what they're doing, and the leadership is covering it up. This goes hand in hand with what we already said. How can someone be sincere about God if he does not submit to God? False religious leaders do not have others' best interests in mind. Else's best interest in mind when they don't even have their own best interest. It's impossible. Again, this happens. Then there is their memory. They come to Pilate and say, "Sir, we remember that when he was still alive, that deceiver said, after 3 days, I'm going to rise again." Well, their memory was working. That's good. I wonder if they remember any of their farce of a trial. They do. Verse 64, therefore give orders for the grave to be made secure until the third day, otherwise his disciples may come and steal him away and say to the people, he has risen from the dead, and the last deception will be worse than the first. And that's pointing back to 3 days prior, when they had their farce. In fact, look in chapter 26, verse 59. The chief priests and the whole council kept trying to obtain false testimony against Jesus. The word there, the way some grammarians point out the tense of this word to figure it out, is that it's as though you're in the bleachers of a parade as it goes by. You can't see either end. All you see is it continues to go by. This parade continues to go by. I think that's ironic because that's exactly what they were doing. They were parading people on and on and on and on and on, trying to get false testimony. Did they remember that? Here before Pilate. Oh, they remembered part of their trial. Here's the deal. They remembered part of their trial. They remembered only what they wanted to remember. This is the method of operation for the false teacher. He takes what serves him and forgets the rest. When I was down in Westview some 15 years ago, there was a little boy. He was at Jensen. I forget his name. He was a little boy. He was probably 5 years old or so. And he would be in class, the little boy's class. And he'd be doing all right until the teacher called on him. He He was 2 years old. He was 2 years old. He would be doing all right until the teacher called on him. Who is God? And then he'd fake going to sleep. Every time. It's amazing how that happened. The false leader is doing fine until it turns on him, and then he forgets. Around my house, husbands, don't copy this. Marcy will ask me to do something very often, probably too often. I will say to her, well, honey, I love you, but I forgot how to do that. I've just forgotten. I don't know how. I've forgotten. Now, I'm joking. They do it with the Word of God. Consider a modern example. So here's a Calvinist. You guys have heard of this guy. This is what he writes. You've read this quote too. The necessity of baptism for salvation has been inferred from John 3 and Mark 16. Now I know all you know these passages, so I'm not going to turn them. If somebody was visiting, I would. But you know these passages, and you say, yeah, that's right. Why do you say that? Because it is. Now he also writes this. We are bound to God's ordinances. That's right. If God says it, we must say it. If God doesn't say it, we must not. We are bound to... Hey man, he gets it, doesn't he? He gets it. The question is, does he remember it? This is the whole quote. But while we are bound to God's ordinances, God himself is free and can save whomsoever and by whatsoever means he pleases. Amen, he can. And you know what he chose? Baptism. But what do they do? You know, you've heard it 1,000 times. You go up and you talk to God can save anybody the way he wants to. And they have this part down and they have forgotten that part. That's their method of operation. It can't be ours. We can't forget, right? Okay. There's their low opinion of Jesus. That deceiver. Did you catch that? Sir, we remember that when he was still alive, that deceiver. Words mean things. How people use names mean things also. You guys remember Saddam Hussein? That was no accident. How about Rocket Man? You might not agree with the policy, but the point is they're using the names to make their own points. Rocket Man, he didn't even use the name. They don't even use Jesus' name. It is he of whom we do not speak. That deceiver. Oh, you recognize what word, but that's who Satan is. Which we're not surprised about because they called him, remember, he cast out a demon by Beelzebul. So they've already got him together. Did they have such a low opinion of themselves? Remember their trial? Did they have that low opinion? He's a deceiver. Well, they were too. Did they have that low opinion of themselves? Obviously not. If it takes one to know one, then they implicate themselves, don't they? It doesn't take one to know one. Because Jesus wasn't one, but he knew one when he saw one. That was it. Right? Jesus says, they're the deceivers. Well, he wasn't one, and here's my point. We ourselves had better not be deceivers. At the same time, we had better look for deceivers. And we had better be able to observe and spot a deceiver. So in 1 Peter, chapter, 2 Peter, or I can just do this and look at it. 2 Peter chapter 2. Chapter 1, verse 19. We have the prophetic word made sure. Here's the word. You've got to hold on to this word. Verse 2. Know this. First, you've got to hold on to it. Okay, yes. Now he gives us a warning. Know this. First, that no prophecy of Scripture is a matter of one's own interpretation, for no prophecy was ever made by an act of human will, but by men moved by the Holy Spirit spoke from God. So he's saying, look, there is only one interpretation. Now, you'll notice it's past tense. Way back then, God said it. So you don't get to play with it. That's back then. We had this word made more sure. You better pay attention. Why? Verse 2. Verse 1. But false prophets also arose among the people, past tense, just as there will also be false teachers among you, who will secretly induce destructive heresies, even denying the master. So I was doing a little research. I came across the fact that there was a Presbyterian in about 1920. His name, Harry Emerson Fosdick. He was a Presbyterian. John MacArthur calls him a leader back then. He was a leader. He was at least a pastor of a church, and he was much more than just a pastor of a church in New York City. He denied the resurrection and Jesus Christ's deity. Now, I'm not here to say that that man himself was a Christian. But he falls under Christendom. And in that umbrella, there are Christians who deny Jesus Christ. Can you imagine it? It's out there. Now here's the problem. They bring swift destruction upon themselves. If there wasn't hell, none of this would matter. But there is hell. Many will follow their sensuality, and because of them the way of truth will be maligned, and in their greed they will exploit you with false words. Their judgment from long ago is not idle, and their destruction is not asleep. Hey, there are false teachers. We got to watch out. I might not be one. I sure can identify one. I better be able to identify one. And when I do, I call them like I see them. And I'm just following the steps of Jesus when we do that. Defining characteristics of the false leader. He is inconsistent. He's a liar. I'm not. Totally inconsistent. He is not based in fact or faith. He's a liar. No, he's not. You're the liar. The more time spent with a false teacher, the more clearly his fraud is seen. And sometimes it'll come out in their words. Sometimes it'll just be by the way that they act. Right? John 14, verse 31. Verse 31, Jesus says, so that the world may know that I love the Father. Okay, here's a purpose clause. And it's going to be followed with some kind of something. Well, the purpose, the result he's trying to get is, so the world will know I love the Father. Okay, now what's going to happen? I do sometimes what he says. I do exactly as, okay, so if doing exactly shows the love of the Son for the Father, what would doing not exactly? Doing but not exactly show about the Son's opinion of the Father? A little bit less than exactly love. Verse 15, Jesus turns it around on us and says, if you love me, yes, you will keep my commandments. And if it isn't stated enough, verse 21, he who has my commandments and keeps them is the one who loves me. 3, if anyone loves me, he will keep my word. Verse 24, he who does not love me does not keep my word. You can't say it anymore. Positive and negative. There is their purpose. Okay, not actually believing that his body would be raised. Listen, sir, we remember that while he was still alive, that deceiver said, after 3 days I am to rise again. They don't believe that. They just don't believe it. Not believing his words, and false teachers do not believe his words. Let me give you a couple modern examples. Jesus said in Mark 16:16, he who has believed and been baptized shall be saved, but he who has disbelieved shall be condemned. That's our master, our Savior, says that, God himself. John MacArthur says, in his notes on Mark 16:16, it does not teach that baptism saves. Now, what I'm doing here is just pointing out what we need to be aware of. He does not believe his words. It's actually that simple. It's not that he's confused, he is. But he just doesn't believe those words. I'll illustrate it this way. If you want to see my wife upset with Lee, watch when she tells me something and then I say, I'm just not sure that's true. or something to that effect. The implication is, I don't believe you. I'm sure Marcy. I don't even have to say, no, Marcy, it didn't say that. All I have to say is, I'm not sure you got that one right. Now, just indicate, is that true? Yeah. I bet you I never, watch, I bet you I never say, it didn't say that. That's not true. And if she were to say, yes, you do say that sometimes, and I say, I'm not sure you're right about that. Yeah? My point here is this. You don't have to say, it doesn't teach that. You can say, does that really teach that? No, there's a point in your learning curve where you will say, does that really mean that? But we're beyond that. We're to the, does it really say that? And you know, you don't trust those words. This man says it negatively. It does not teach that. He just doesn't believe the words. Here's another one. This is a nearby example. Jesus said through his inspired apostle Peter in 1 Peter 3:21, baptism now saves you. Right down the road here, the New Hope Baptist Church in Watertown says in their statement of faith, go online. This isn't from 100 years ago. This isn't from 1,000 years ago. This is now and here. So you got to watch out for it. We believe that scriptural baptism must be, and then he's going to have some conditions, after salvation. Now, I'm assuming that they, because the Reformation is going on for 500 years now. They just don't believe it. That's what's going on. But those who are not confused just don't believe it. Because that's what the false teacher does. Okay, so back here, their purpose is to avoid people being deceived. If you notice this, verse 64, therefore gives orders for the grave to be made secure until the third day. Otherwise, his disciples may come and steal him away and say to the people, he has risen from the dead, and the last deception will become worse than the first. Okay, that's what they're trying to avoid. Really? If they're really trying to avoid that, then why not just say, oh, here's a list of our deceptions. Starting with 3 days prior, or 2 days prior, yesterday. Yesterday we had a sham of a trial. They're not really concerned about whether or not the people are being deceived. Okay, that's the issue here. Okay, they don't care. Anything but, if I have to confess my false teacher is not interested in the welfare of the people. Their purpose is to keep the people deceived. With Lazarus, he's raised from the dead, and instead of letting the people know the truth, they want to kill. Their intent is to keep the people. Here in Acts chapter 4, Peter had healed the man who had been lame from his mother's womb. They're thrown in prison. We'll pick up in verse 14. Seeing the man who had been healed. Now this is talking about the rulers. Seeing the man who had been healed, standing with them, they had nothing to say in reply, and they should have left it there, shouldn't they? But when they had ordered them to leave the council, they began to confer with one another, saying, what shall we do with these men? For the fact that a noteworthy miracle has taken place through them is apparent to all who live in Jerusalem, and we cannot deny it. But so that it will not spread any further, let's tell them not to talk. They didn't care about the people. Their purpose, their goal, is to keep the people deceived. Now, I will point out this. Not all false teachers are so aware of their role. If you walked up to these people and pressed them, you'd finally get them to admit, yeah, I don't care about the truth. Many false teachers would never admit that because they just don't understand that. In fact, in Acts chapter 3, verse 17, Peter is talking to them. Brethren, I know that you acted in ignorance just as your rule. You didn't actually know what you were doing. That's a different class than the people we're talking about here. Okay, actually it's the same class. There's a mixture, right? There's some mixture. Acts 13, Paul, so that was Peter. Paul says it too. Verse 26, brethren, sons of Abraham's family, and those among you who fear God, to us the message of the salvation has been sent out. For those who live in Jerusalem and their rulers, recognizing neither him nor the utterances of the prophets, which are read every Sabbath, fulfilled these by condemning him. Though they found no grounds for putting him to death, they asked Pilate that he be executed, and when they had carried out all that is written concerning him, they took him down from the cross and laid him in the tomb. This is the same scene. Paul says, some of you didn't know what you're doing. Even those who didn't know what they were doing were still Satan's minions. Because in Genesis chapter 3, God says to Satan, he will bruise you on the head. But you, Satan, will bruise him on the heel. Well, when was that taking place? On the cross. It's laid at Satan's feet. He's the one that's behind it, controlling it all, and he's using people who are what we call sometimes useful idiots. Right? They didn't know what they were doing. Some of them didn't know, but they are guilty. Here's my point. False religion, knowingly or unknowingly, is bad. It is the work of Satan. Make sure you view it as that. Have that in perspective of it. Then there's the low opinion of Jesus' disciples. Therefore, verse 64, give orders for the grave to be made secure until the third day. Otherwise, his disciples may come and steal him away and say to the people deception. Because the disciples have a track record of doing that, don't they? Stealing and lying everywhere they're going. So here's a couple points from this. They had no evidence of conspiracy. They judged the disciples to be guilty before, and they were not believing all things. Now this is subtle but huge. They were not believing all things of innocent people. 1 Corinthians 13, you remember that? What's that say about love? Right? Is that important? 1 Corinthians 13. Love believes all things and hopes all things. Not for these people. They believe the worst. On no evidence. Zero. Nada. None. Jesus had said, a disciple is not above his teacher, nor a slave above his master. If they had called the head of the household Beelzebul, how much more would they malign the members of his household, right? And this is exactly what they're dealing with. Expect to be mistreated by false leaders. Expect it. Jesus said so. Expect to be mistreated by the false leader. If they disregard God's word in one point, like he is the Messiah, then they'll disregard it in another point, like treat other people with love. That's the way it goes. Expect it. Expect to be mistreated by the false leader. The false leader is unloving because he has not submitted to the word. This word is what takes us and changes us. You're bad. You're ugly. I want to be better. God says, here's this word. Know it. Obey it. Submit to this word, and it'll take a little time, but I'll turn you into the person that you ought to be. And they never submitted. So it is no surprise that they were ugly to the core on the inside, especially towards those who were trying to obey this. The false leader cannot help you overcome sin. Remember this, don't forget it. What's the problem with false religion? 2, number 1, it sends you right to hell. Number 2, it does not help you. It can't. I've got a sin problem. I'm just going to go visit that church. Unless that church has submitted to God's word, it cannot help you. Other than to point out what's wrong. Their low opinion of the people's intelligence. They'll be deceived. They won't be able to figure out that somebody who is dead is walking around. Really? That's how dumb these people are? That's what they thought. The rulers say to a man whom Jesus had healed, "You were born entirely in your sins, and you're teaching us." And the last thing that he had said, he had been healed. Everybody knew it. They call him in 3 times. He's getting exasperated. The last thing he said is, "Since the beginning of time, it has not been heard that somebody heals the eyes of a blind man." If he were not from God, he could. No brainer. And listen to what they say. "You were born in your sins." You can't figure this out. You're too dumb. You can't figure it out. Leave it to me. Leave it to us. Leave it to the smart ones. It's not the only time they'll do it. The Pharisees then answered the guards. They send the guards, and the guards come back and say, "Nobody's talked like him." And they say, "You have not also been led astray, have you? No one of the rulers of the Pharisees has believed him, has he?" See, we're the ones that know. You can't do what we do. Martin Luther says about infant baptism, "Here's a question occurs by which the devil through his sects confuses the world, namely of infant baptism. Whether children also believe and are justly baptized. Concerning this, we say briefly, let the simple dismiss this question from their minds and refer it to the learned." George, I'm the preacher. I'm the simple preacher. He's not the only one. On premillennialism, the Old Testament in reality teaches the church and the kingdom have the same purpose almost 99%. I'm not going to go all the way. Dispensational premillennialists say, no, the church is radically, completely different, not even talked about in the Old Testament, only the kingdom is. Why do they function the same in the New Testament, right? That's the question. Why is there so much overlap there? We must not try to understand such a seeming paradox. The truth must stand, even though it may seem to the human mind to involve a paradox. You know, when you tell me this, and I look at the scripture, I'm coming up with a paradox. And he says, don't try, you listen to me. I'm the ruler. I'm the leader. I'm the spiritual. You listen to me. And I'm telling you, don't try to understand it. Just let the paradox go. Let me do the thinking for you. You've seen this quote also on Calvinism's predestination. If predestination is true, then God is the author of sin. The Calvinists do too. So what do they say? There is, now he quotes John Calvin, a learned ignorance. Stop thinking. Well, I can't figure this out. This seems to be logically inconsistent. There's a mystery here. That's different. God says, if there's a mystery I have not revealed, Deuteronomy 29:29, you don't try to figure that out. But logically, if there's a logical inconsistency, then we have a problem. And they say, there's a learned ignorance. Just stop thinking about it. The rigorous logic of Calvin and Augustine breaks down. Logic breaks down. Well, then you got a problem. But they just say, and now he throws in this new alternative. Moral logic triumphs over intellectual logic. Really? Moral logic? God says in Isaiah chapter 1, come now, let us reason together. And we say, wait a minute. Now, are you talking about moral logic, God, or logic? It's ridiculous. The most rigorous predestinarian is driven to the alternative of choosing to think or not. And they choose not to think. And he is saying, I'm the leader here. I'm the guy that's at the theological university. I know you're coming up with these questions, but let me tell you the solution. Just don't think about it. Right? Religion wants to keep you out of the Bible. So the Mormons have something called another testament to Jesus Christ. Yes, that means they want to pick up that book and not this one. The Watchtower folks do it a little differently. They just pick up this book and change the words in it. Hey, great. You're still not talking. And then there are all the creeds. Each of them being what? A different interpretation. All of them want you not to be in this book. That's what they're trying to do. Their low opinion of people's the sheep will know his voice, right? We're going to go quickly. Their plan is to keep the body. That's their plan, that's their goal. Plan being their goal. Now, verse 64, therefore give orders for the grave to be made secure. Why? So the body is taken. Until the third day. Otherwise his disciples may come and steal him away and say to the people, he is arisen from the dead, and the last deception will be worse than the first. Verse 65, Pilate said to him, you have a guard. Go make it as secure as you know how. As secure as you know. Let's get the committee together and brainstorm. How are we going to keep God of the universe from having this body? Remember, the Bible teaches that the body is alive when the spirit's in it. Right now, the spirit's not in it. 1 Peter 3 tells us where the spirit is. But the spirit's going to come back. And when that spirit comes back, the body is walking out. Let's see, the God of the universe, how are we going to stop him? I've got a great idea. They went and made the grave secure. And along with the guard, they set a seal on the stone. Now that seal involved either wax or clay, probably. I'm going to go with wax, because they're both the same when you're dealing with God. I've got a great idea. I'm going to stop God. Give me some wax. This is insane. After the Sabbath, as it began to dawn toward the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary came to look at the grave. Behold, there was, how did God deal with the wax? An earthquake from an angel. But this is just insanity, right? Acts 2 says it was impossible to keep him. And they tried anyway. How foolish of them. But notice, they hadn't learned anything. In Matthew 22, these people, the Sadducees, asked him, remember the Sadducees who say there is no body getting up, resurrection, they came in and questioned him. Verse 29, Jesus answered and said to them, you are mistaken, not understanding the scriptures, nor the power of God. Yeah, they tried to stop him with wax, or a clay seal, whatever it was. By the way, you ever notice when you're talking with somebody who does not believe that baptism is necessary? I just keep using baptism because it's a perfect illustration. Baptism isn't necessary. What about the native in the Amazon? First of all, you're not the native in the Amazon. I've never been there. Let's just talk about us. Let's trust God, who's got all this kind of power, to deal with that Amazonian native. You know, God can work it out. God put him there. God requires he's baptized. God requires that he hears. God can send the preacher. Trust God. The people who say, what about this person, don't trust the power of God. It's a plain and simple thing. Notice, by this time, they had already seen Lazarus raised. They do not care about the truth. That's it. There's nothing to do with being in line with the truth. They don't love the truth. They don't want to be in line with the truth. And that's where they are. Their low opinion of God, yeah, which is their pride, by the way. We can stop them with wax. That's what you think about our God? There's their exposure as frauds. In chapter 28, and then we'll be done, verse 11, while they were on their way, so Mary Magdalene sees the risen Christ and sends, he says, go, tell the brethren to go to Galilee. Verse 11, while they were on their way, some of the guard came into the city and reported to the chief priests all that had happened. When they had assembled with the elders and consulted together, they gave a large sum of money to the soldiers and said, you are to say, his disciples, cover up number 3 that we're reading. You are to say, his disciples came by night and stole him away while we were asleep. And I don't have to read the end of the story, you know it. But right there, if nowhere else, they exposed themselves as frauds. And if to nobody else, those guards knew. Now, God always knew. But if nobody else ever knew they're frauds, those guards did. Often we find ourselves in that situation. Look, if I go teach a false leader and he doesn't accept it, and I'm assuming that I'm right here, he doesn't accept it, he's exposed as a false leader. If to nobody else than me, what do you do about it? Let God deal with that. Just move on. Move on. searching for people who want to know the truth. And when you find them, you grab them and you hold on to them. To expose fraud, one must first know the truth. So study. The enemies of God were false religious leaders. He didn't send the atheists. Satan didn't send the atheists, the agnostic, the evil people, quote unquote. Well, he does, but not in this situation. This makes it harder to see that they were false. So we must know the truth all the more. Working from the wrong belief will cause you to go in the wrong direction, make the wrong decisions, think wrongly of other people, and more. Know and obey the truth. Have you been burned by false leaders? They get away with it for a little while. It was also partly your own fault. You need to know the truth. Part of it's your own fault. From now on, you don't have to be duped and wronged and hurt by false teachers. From now on, you must help others avoid being burned by teaching them the truth. And I don't mean that you're burned. They'll be burned by having been taught the truth. You got the grammar wrong. Trust God. I find this amazing. Yeah, trust God. I don't find that amazing. What I find amazing is this. They were so diligent to secure that grave so that no man could mess with it. And in that very act, they confirmed that no man had messed with it. They fell right into God's will. They couldn't have planned that, but God. He's the one that knows. He's in control of all things. Put your faith and your trust in Him, and everything will be fine. Thank you for your good attention.